Hey everybody, welcome back to the Rochester Real Estate Show podcast. Jason Mancuso here with the Anthony Butera team at Keller Williams Realty, and joined again by Derek Schlueter.
Hello, all.
What's up?
What's going on?
We're in the heart of the fall here. We just had a conversation about football, which we won't bore you with. Should probably start another. We should start a sports podcast too. I love your idea for Halloween coming up.
Yeah.
Do not, I won't tell people where you live, but do not trick or treat around Derek's neighborhood.
I may or may have not bought a boat air horn to make kids aware on Halloween.
Make them aware. I like that. I like that phrasing.
Safety first.
Yes, sir. Good stuff. Yeah, we'll have to get those bloopers out there. What are you seeing out there in the market? A lot of news headlines flying around as usual with real estate, and I think rightfully so right now, just in terms of what's going on with interest rates, what's going on, in the national market. But then there's local in Rochester, New York. I mean, I just had a conversation with somebody. They were in Detroit, Michigan, and they had somebody that they wanted to get in touch with us, and somebody that they know close, and was just kind of explaining how a different market works in comparison to our market. And just I had to kind of tell them, like, look, I get it, but we're still in this seller's market of sorts.
Yeah.
It's just kind of, it's definitely cooling. But what are you seeing out there?
So I held 613 Paul Road open on Saturday. And, I was telling Shane and somebody else in the office earlier that, it was from 12 to 2. I'm sitting there from 12 to 12:30, and I'm just like sitting at the kitchen table. I'm like, where is everybody? I'm like, oh my gosh. From 12:30 on, I had nonstop people in the house. At one point, I had 23 people in the house.
Wow.
And it was insane until 2 o'clock.
Wow.
It was...
You had a lot of traffic.
A lot of traffic.
How many showings were on that?
Probably 8 or 9 on between Friday and Sunday.
So still decent activity, but we're seeing it in terms of open houses are back.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, let's recap the last couple of years of open houses. Right. I mean, there was COVID, which no open houses, and then coming out of COVID, kind of a hesitation around it, rightfully so, safety-wise, all that, or, mandates in terms of, like, one at a time, yeah. Kind of turned into, like, all right, it's more of a pain in the butt to do it. And for sellers, too, like, rightfully so, unknown, scary times, and, like, I'd rather not have 23 people in my house at one time.
Right.
I get it. From, I think, overall, the buyer perspective of things, like, buyers have known that this market has been so competitive in the last couple of years leading up to 2022 that I got one shot at this. Rather than going to an open house, I want to get an appointment with my agent, book a time slot, get as hard of a look at it as I can, in comparison to tripping over people, and be able to make a decision on it from there. Because, again, in this environment of waiving inspections and all this, aggressive nature on a buyer's side, open houses kind of fell off for a little bit, and now they're back. Yeah. Right? I mean, that was we'll talk about how it played out a little bit. We can't tell everything, but do you know the buyer that ended up writing, or the buyers that wrote on it, were they scheduled showings or from the open house?
One was scheduled showing and one was from the open house.
So, arguably without that open house, you had 2 offers on this property.
Yep.
One of them may not have offered on it.
Right.
So,
and it's, it's a different market too. They're competing offers, but they were VA.
Yeah.
Which, a year ago, you wouldn't have even entertained that. And, you got to take advantage of it when you can,
Right, yeah. No, I mean, so $200,000 home in Chili, decent house, right?
Yeah, it's definitely a 10 out of 10.
Yeah, nice house.
Yeah.
Good activity in terms of almost 10 showings. Great activity in an open house, another 30 people or so, right?
Yep.
So, overall you had, I mean, so call it like 20 showings at the open house probably
Yeah.
in terms of like couples there.
Yeah,
and everything
yeah,
else.
families and stuff like
All
that.
right,
Yep.
so you had 30 interested parties come through this house in the period of when it was on the market
Yeah.
before the offers were due.
Yep.
I mean, that, I guess like if you would have told me this time last year that we'd be looking, excuse me, at interest rates above 7% in October of 2022, and there'd still be 30 people interested in buying a house anywhere
Yeah.
in any
Yeah.
condition,
Yeah.
I would have told you that seems a little, over optimistic.
It was funny too because the buyers, when I was talking to them at the open house, they were telling me how they rent out in Avon, and I made the statement that, well, 7% interest is much better than 100% interest, which is what you're doing when you're renting.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, and it's yeah, I was just shocked at the amount of people, and the thing is, people always need to find a place to live.
Yeah.
That's not going to change.
No, and I mean, the way that we've been talking about it recently with what's happening, especially with the interest rates, and inflation plays into this too, in terms of like everything's more expensive, people's groceries, people's gas, heating costs, etc. Is going to cut into people's budget. It's going to cut into the financial side of, just housing affordability for everybody.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, every single adult has a budget for housing that they just know they have to have. I mean, basic human need of shelter, right?
Right.
So I think, the way that we've been talking about it lately is just like, all right, we've had a lot of luxury type purchases in the last few years leading up to 2022.
Yeah.
Whereas like rates are so low, back to COVID, like I think there was a big thing of like, I don't want to be stuck inside my house and a house that I don't enjoy anymore, or if I'm renting an apartment or whatever the situation is, like, a lot more luxury decisions versus I need to do this.
Yeah.
And, the need spectrum of things is just going to vary in terms of like, I need to do it because like, death, divorce, growing family, relocating, whatever it is. And the other opposite side of that spectrum of just, need to do it because I'm sick of renting or land, something like that, right? So it's just, it essentially costs more because of the interest rates. If you're getting financing to buy a house, it costs more right now because rates are higher.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's gonna reduce the demand, certainly. Just like on paper, saying everything out loud, right? Like that's a conclusion you would come to. Demand is going to get reduced. That's definitely happening. I'm not here to argue that, right? But we're just pointing a story of, okay, still 30 interested buyers on
Yeah.
one listing.
Yeah.
So, there's still that story of the supply side of things, the listing inventory. No real end in sight in terms of that, like improving to where it just meets the demand out there.
I check every day on new listings coming on market, and I'm like 45. I'm like,
They're there, but they're just, again, just using this scale of 30 to 1.
Yeah.
There's 30 buyers out there for one house. And, a year ago, 2 years ago, it may have been 100 to 1. I think that's the kind of dynamic in play. I think where the real like shift is happening is you had 2 offers on this property, this listing.
Correct.
Instead of last year, it was probably would have been
17.
a dozen.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's where the shift is playing out here locally. And this is where you got to get real apples to apples when you're talking real estate. And by apples to apples, I mean market to market, local market to local market, right? Because we're in a different market than, like I said, that example of Detroit, Michigan. Other areas of the country are, probably more in that like hard shift, either a balanced market or a buyer's market even. We're not seeing that here. We're just seeing things cooling significantly. And, this is a conversation we've been having all year, but it's still, here we are in October, which is typically our seasonal period. And we had a bunch of listings last week on our team come up, and none of them had a problem selling.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, we're still in this seller's market, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, I still have a couple listings coming up in the next few weeks, and I'm not concerned at all that they're not going to sell.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
it's nice.
And if anything, the advice, that we give sellers, today is, like, hate to be doom and gloom in terms of, like, is there a ticking time bomb out there? But we can't be confident of the spring market coming up. Like, we don't know. We know it's happening today.
Yeah.
And things are still happening if you're a seller with a good outcome. Who knows what happens a month from now, much less 4 or 5, 6 months from now.
That's the exact conversation I'm having with the sellers. Is like, I don't know what the springs. It could be 10% interest next year. I have no idea.
Yeah.
So
I mean, yeah, that's exactly it. And there's all sorts of other, just call them global factors, for lack of a better word, right? Economy, everything else going on. Like, who knows?
Yep.
So at the end of the day, if you need to buy, there's still a way to do it, even though on paper it may seem like, wow, the interest rate's doubled. Why would I do that?
Yeah.
The point you made, like, and it's valid in terms of, like, if you're renting, no matter what, you're never going to have a shot of equity. And that's where that line comes into play.
Yeah.
Right? Is essentially that 7% interest rate. That's the cost of obtaining your equity over time, is a way to think of it, right?
Yep.
Versus, I mean, you're not necessarily paying interest when you're renting, but you're certainly not paying yourself or having a shot at that.
Yeah.
So you're paying somebody else's mortgage at that point.
And like you said too, is like people still have lives that change. Like, I'm working with a couple that's moving here from Denver, a job change. A couple that's moving here from Buffalo because job change.
Exactly.
So
There's always going to be a real estate market.
yeah.
And the reality of what this market's gonna, the news on January 1st or later in the month, once all the data comes in, the 2022 real estate market, from a national data standpoint, is going to be one of the biggest year-over-year declines in history. And the news is just going to spit that out as, biggest drop in real estate market ever. They're not going to tell you about
That it's been going up for 6 years.
It's coming off, a near all-time high, and this is, we're in corrective times at the end of the day. So, I mean, it's not even to say if there's a will, if there's a way, right? It's just like, if you need to do something, there's always a way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we're in this time right now where if you don't need to buy a home or you don't need to move, and depending on where you're at with that house, with that financial situation and everything, that kind of causes the need for a need, I guess, right?
Yeah.
But ultimately, if you're not in that need category, you're probably not going to do anything.
And
makes sense.
A lot of times too, I'll have conversations with buyers and just say, we can let me play devil's advocate. Let's go back a year ago. Do you want to pay $125,000 over asking for this house, or do you want to get it for around asking and pay a little bit more interest? It's kind of a trade-off,
It really is. And I mean, you run the numbers, they're close, right? Because that's what's been happening. This significant amount of competitiveness that you have to buy into as a buyer in the market of the past.
Yeah.
That's what's going away. The reason for that and the cost of that is a higher interest rate. So it's like, okay, you may save, just ballpark examples, 50 grand compared to what this house would have sold for in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
But you're paying a higher rate. Now, worth getting into, that comment I just made is not like the market's going to tank 50 grand in terms of home values. In theory, if you're looking at you bought a house last year in comparison to what it would sell for this year or next year, that could be $50,000 less. Important to understand that.
Yeah.
But if you're not selling or needing to sell, not that it's irrelevant, because it is, your equity in play, but it's just similar to like your 401k. don't look at it.
Yeah, just
Ride
just
it
go
out.
with it.
Just go, like you'll drive yourself nuts, especially in the next 2 years coming up, most likely. If you're just looking at, okay, what could my home sell for in today's market? If you just bought at the peak. Now, if you just bought at the peak and you need to sell, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
tough to predict, but hopefully that's not the case in a lot of these cases. So
Yeah.
we'll see. So segue into really a topic of opportunity, right? I mean, you mentioned it with this listing. So this listing, we can't say for what, but it's still sold for over asking.
Correct.
Seller's very happy.
Yep.
Right. 2 offers total. Both offers were VA offers.
Correct.
And as you mentioned, the comment of essentially like, you didn't stand a chance last year, right? Now it's if you're a buyer that has a VA loan or has weaker financing or needs, concessions, something like that, it's now possible.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, I think inspections are going to be making a comeback too. So if
Yeah.
you're a buyer that, frankly, rightfully so, that wants nothing to do with purchasing a home without an inspection, I get it. Hasn't really been something that you could pull off in the last few years, practically speaking. In terms of like percentage odds, it's not that it's been impossible to have an inspection
Right.
on a property, right? But just, for lack of a better way to explain the intensity around it, I mean, 9 out of 10.
It's my first inspection
At
in over a
least,
year and a half
right.
last week.
Yeah.
It was kind of nuts.
Yeah. So
And the thing is too, is the VA loan's 100% financeable too.
it's a huge advantage to
yeah,
do it. I mean, I've said it on this show before. I say it all the time. And honest to God, the number one thing that I hate about this business is that aspect of, hey, thanks for your service. You're entitled to a VA loan. You can take advantage of 100% financing. Good luck getting an offer accepted.
Right. Right.
And it just, comes across the perception of it. It's not necessarily even the reality is all true, but the perception of it in the industry in general, has some negative connotation to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I guess that's more on the extreme side of things in the market that we've been in the last couple of years, where, cash is king more than ever. And, in that dozen offer situation, there's 1, 2 VA or FHA financing offers, 8 conventional and 2 cash.
Yeah.
That's kind of how it played out.
Yeah.
Maybe even more cash, right? Maybe like 6 conventional and 4 cash offers
Yep.
between whether it's, liquid or these banks that have gotten bored with doing, cash guarantee programs, stuff like that. So, you're just looking at it from the seller perspective of like, okay, I have cash, I have strong financing, and then I have, these varying categories of, for lack of a better word, I'm using air quotes, right? Like weaker financing.
Yeah.
And it just sucks because it's not necessarily that like, okay, no, you got a VA loan, no shot that it's closing. It's just a matter of weighing risk for sellers. That's how they've been advised to look at it for so long. Different story coming
Yeah.
up now.
Yeah.
I don't want to paint a picture of like, hey, guns a-blazing for the buyers. Like I'm not painting a picture like we're in a buyer's market. You just got more opportunity than ever.
Yeah.
Or not than ever, but in the last 3, 4, 5 years.
Yeah, and it's like I'm taking advantage of this with my buyers. I got a contingent offer.
Lost the microphone, folks.
No table surfing.
Yeah.
I got a contingent offer accepted with an inspection. I mean,
Yeah.
that wouldn't have happened
No.
in the last 3 years. So
3 at least. I mean,
Yeah.
keep in mind, we've been, this really started in like 2017.
yeah,
The extreme took place 2020 and 2021.
21. Yeah,
But 19, 18 were very strong sellers markets as well, with very similar conversations in play. I mean, you don't mean to air out your business, but you're a veteran.
yeah.
What's your perception on these VA loans? Like, why are they looked at this way?
I think because the appraisals are very stringent as compared to the other loans.
Yeah.
you know, when they do appraisals for like a conventional loan, they basically just walk through the house, you know, go outside, measure some stuff, and that's about it. You know, VA, they have a checklist of stuff that they have to look at.
They're taking a really hard look at it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Which, you know, so as a seller perspective, would make sense if your house has issues.
right.
Because there are certain things that a conventional appraisal won't catch that a VA or even an FHA appraisal would.
Yeah, yeah,
So yeah, if you know, like peeling paint, for example, could be just a little bit of it.
yeah,
And, that little bit would most likely wouldn't get flagged with conventional, but it would with VA.
yeah,
You got to understand, as a seller or a buyer, just anybody in the market, if you're getting financing and the appraiser says there's an issue, you're not getting financing until that issue's solved,
Yeah.
whether it's price or condition.
yep.
So that is the conduit to a deal, essentially,
Yeah,
to a closing.
and like I had the conversation with the seller too, and he's like, "I'm not concerned at all," and I'm like, "I'm not either."
Yeah.
You know?
Well, and that's the
Yeah.
beauty of it,
Yeah.
right? So that's the advice that we give. Like, hey, sure, if I had a cash offer for you, then yeah, like it's all a risk conversation, right?
Right,
You're
right.
eliminating risk of any type of financing when you have a cash offer. So go with it. And
Yeah.
that's gonna same conversation. It sucks even if you're a conventional buyer at that point with 20% down. But, just in these scenarios where there's so many offers that we're coming out of, yeah, like the FHA, VA, weaker quote unquote loan products will get, kind of kicked to the bottom of the list unless you're really doing something to make up for it.
Yeah,
Right. So, there's benefits to a VA loan though too. We mentioned
Yeah.
100% financing,
Yeah.
which is great, but there's also a lot of scenarios where you're going to end up with a lower interest rate.
yeah,
I mean, I've had a bunch of deals recently, or seen a bunch of deals where, a VA buyer choosing to stick with the VA loan product, doing a 20% down payment because their interest rate's lower than doing conventional.
yep,
Like, these are buyers that would be qualified conventional, no problem, strong buyers, just choosing to do the VA loan because their interest rate's lower.
it's a great product.
Can you blame them?
Yeah,
Right?
yeah,
No, it is, and it is a great product. Sure, it's not going to work with the rundown house that's just beat to hell, but you just, that's where you just got to understand. It's not even like, as a VA buyer, it's not even, have your cake and eat it too conversation. It's
Yeah.
just like, you just got to know how things operate. And if you're going after something that's not going to qualify, then it's not going to qualify.
Yeah.
That's the event where, okay, if you really want that house, then look at conventional, because maybe it'll qualify for that.
yep. See what the other options are.
So it
You know?
may be a higher interest rate at that point. You may, if you're trying to take advantage of the 100% financing, you may have to do 5% down instead. But there's a world of options out there.
Yeah,
And I think, this whole topic is basically, okay, if you're a buyer out there and you've been either sitting on the fence, sitting on the sidelines, or not able to get something accepted up until now, well, sure, cost is higher from an interest standpoint. But if, I always go back, said it 100 times on this show. All that matters if you're buying a home. Are you financially comfortable with the numbers in front of you? So that meaning like today's interest rate. Because being comfortable at 3.5 interest from last year doesn't matter at this
Yeah.
point.
yeah,
So are you comfortable financially, and do you like the house that you're looking at? Sure, there's other factors. but
yeah,
that's-
yeah. And
That's the bulk of it, right?
yeah, and you could always, tell them, we could have the conversation too about refinancing again once, once rates go down,
Well, that's just it, and it's like, I think the industry in general as realtors, like we at least got to show some empathy to what's going on. Meaning, like, there's all these things that you can do to try to, and I guess it's a matter of like, we shouldn't be, what I'm trying to say is we shouldn't be trying to convince somebody of doing something.
Right.
It's just, hey, here's the education of everything involved. So what you're just getting at is like, explaining to a buyer, like, okay, here's today's rate. Yeah, I realize it sucks in comparison. Well, one way to look at it is like, this actually isn't bad from a historical perspective. We usually hover around 6-7% as the average.
Yeah.
Just above average right now.
Yeah, and that's what I do. I lay out the facts
Yeah.
and say, this is what I have. Are you comfortable with this?
Yep. Facts and opinions and let them make the decision, right?
And people appreciate that more versus
Exactly.
the salesman
Yeah,
talk,
yeah,
and
exactly.
it's not.
But I think, what you're getting at is, on the refinance topic, and it's a reality in terms of, okay, you buy a house today, you're going to start building equity over time. You're sheltered by locking in an interest rate now to where if, say the event of or the scenario of you have to buy a home in the next year, like you said, we don't know what the rates are going to be a year from now. And that could go in either direction.
Yeah.
So it could be, okay, now you really need to buy a house 6 months from now and it's at 9%. And you're going to wish you bought it at 7.5%.
Yeah.
Right? And, the other way too, in terms of if you're at 7.5, whatever, and you're established, your tenure, so to speak, in this home, then like it's going to be something long term and the rates drop, well, refinance.
Yeah.
And at that point, maybe you want to pull equity out
Yeah.
and have some cash to do whatever. Maybe you're remodeling at that point. Maybe you're using that to make additional investments, whatever it is. So it's not just like you're locked into a situation, but it's just, most people don't explain it that way. And they just, they'll throw out, they'll get flustered and throw out terms like, what is it? Marry the house, date the rate.
Yeah.
That's another one
Yeah.
that's been, popular this last 6 months or so. And it's like, yeah. I mean, that's legit logic, but we don't, as an industry, we don't do enough to properly explain it so that, if somebody tells me that, I'm just like, marry the house, date the rate, bro. Like, okay.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for
Well, they punch inside your face for
thanks
free.
for selling me your used car type of thing, right? Like punch you inside your face for free. But, I guess the whole point of this show is, whether it's a VA product, which we've talked a little bit about, whether you're FHA needing concessions, just essentially you're not that strong cash buyer. And again, the numbers make sense at today's market. Get in the market.
Yeah.
Because things are starting to favor you more than they have been. Just still understand it's case by case because we are still seeing 10 offers on homes, in pockets. I mean, we've got another listing. I think the offers are due today. I think she's probably going to have close to 10.
Yeah.
So, but there's also, for every one of those, there's one where, either your scenario where like, okay, only 2 offers and both were VA, then that's typically not heard of. Or we struck out and now I got to remarket, as an agent, not remarket, but continue to market and let everybody know, hey, our offer deadline came and go. We didn't sell it. Give me an offer. And now you're essentially at asking price.
Yeah.
So if things make sense financially and you need to make a move, get in the market.
Yep. Opportunities out there.
Anything else to add on the VA, Todd? I think we covered, the appraisals, the 100%, lower interest rate. The process isn't that bad. It's not, it's a perception thing.
Yeah.
In terms of like why it has that negative connotation. I think the biggest thing is, it's a stricter appraisal process. If your house has no issues,
Yeah.
it's going to be fine.
Should be an issue.
Yeah. And it's not like it's not to say that, okay, your roof is fine, but it's only got 10 years of life left that VA is going to make you put a new roof on. It's nothing crazy like that. It's just they flag, essentially health and safety items.
Yeah, it's similar to FHA with like handrails and peeling paint and stuff like that.
So it's just, it's trivial stuff. It just ends up being like in the market that we've been in, sellers have had the luxury to avoid that. Where it's like, I don't want to have to deal with repainting this side of my garage or whatever it is, right?
Yep.
We're coming out of that market, so as a seller, like you got to also understand the dynamics in play.
Yeah.
We just talked about it from the buyer side. There's the seller side of that
Yep.
conversation too. So cool. Good stuff.
All right.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
All right, absolutely. Check us out, AnthonyButerraTeam.com. We're on all the podcast sources and YouTube, and we'll catch you on the next episode. Thanks
Thank you,
again,
everybody.
Derek Schlueter.
Thanks, guys.